In December 2024, a courtroom in Avignon, France, delivered verdicts in what would become one of the most significant trials of our time. Dominique Pellico was sentenced to over 20 years for drugging his wife Giselle and orchestrating her rape by over 70 men across nearly a decade. 50 other men were convicted. Some received 15 years, some received 3. It is important to note that Giselle Pellico chose to make her trial public. She waived her right to anonymity. She sat in that courtroom and she said, "Shame must change sides." And when that trial ended, many of us believed that it exposed an aberration, a singular horror perpetrated by a monster. We were wrong. In March 2026, CNN published the results of months-long investigation. What they found was not an isolated incident. It was infrastructure. Global networks of men, husbands, partners, teaching each other how to drug and rape the women they live with, how to choose the right medication, how to avoid detection, how to profit from filming the assaults. This episode is about that investigation. It's about what women need to know, and it's about why this keeps happening. Because this is not about individual monsters. This is about what systems built on the devaluation of women make possible. And I want to talk about it. The CNN investigation began with a pornographic website called motherless.com. The site describes itself as a moral-free file host that anything legal is hosted forever. It had 62 million visits in February 2026 alone. Its largest audience is in the US. Buried among one of its 100 categories of content is something called sleep videos, over 20,000 of them. In these videos, men film themselves assaulting unconscious or sedated women. Some videos show something called an eye check, where a man lifts the closed eyelid of a woman to prove to viewers that she is not conscious. Some of the videos have over 50,000 views. CNN reporters posing as users found links from Motherless to a Telegram group called Triple Z's. Nearly 1,000 members, men from across the world. In that group, they traded advice. One man wrote, "Been wanting to do this to my missus for ages. I can get the drug, but honestly, she's scared of overdose." Another responded, "Always start low. You're thinking long game, so if first time ain't enough, up the dose." They also discussed which medications work best, how to disguise the taste, what to do if the woman wakes up or feels nauseous, and how to gaslight her if she suspects something. Some men advertise live streams, real-time footage of them raping their unconscious wives for $20 per viewer, paid in cryptocurrency. One seller, claiming to operate from the North African coast, offered bottles of what he called sleeping pills for $175 shipped worldwide. His sales pitch: your wife won't feel anything and won't remember anything. This is not random depravity. This is organized and commodified. In April 2026, Polish authorities arrested a man the media identified as Piotr, one of the men CNN had tracked through investigations. He'd been charged with aggravated rape and could face up to 20 years if convicted. But the platforms he used are still operating. The groups still exist. The advice is still being shared. CNN spoke with 3 survivors. All of them discovered in different ways that their husbands or partners had been drugging and raping them. Zoe Watts in Devon, England, was married for 16 years, 4 children. They went to church together. One Sunday in 2018, her husband confessed. He told her he'd been crushing their son's sleeping medication into her nightly cup of tea, that he'd been tying her down, photographing her, raping her. Her husband is serving 11 years for rape, sexual assault, and drugging. Amanda Stanhope in Northwest England spent 5 years waking up in different clothes, bruises on her body, and she couldn't explain them. She'd fall asleep without remembering how. A few times, she woke up to her partner violently raping her. When she asked him to stop, he told her she was imagining it, that she was on too much medication, that she was crazy. With her brother's support, she went to the police. But when she showed them video evidence of her partner sexually assaulting her while unconscious, the police said, "We can't use that. It looks like you're pretending to be asleep." Her former partner was eventually charged. He died by suicide before trial. Amanda now posts on social media to warn other women, but she told CNN, "I see everyone as a potential predator. It took my innocence for people away." Valentina, not her real name, is a mother of two in northern Italy. She was married for 20 years. She found on her husband's device videos of him assaulting her after he had drugged her with alcohol and sedatives. She doesn't remember the abuse. There was no physical marks, but she said that she couldn't conceive of the fact that a woman was basically treated like meat. Her husband was sentenced to 8 years for multiple aggravated sexual assaults. Valentina is seen a psychologist, but she said the trauma is always there. As much as she might be happy or smiling or going about life, she has to deal with it. She has to become friends, in her words, with her nightmares. What the stories have in common is that these women trusted their partners. And by trusting, they are not being naive, they are not being foolish, but their trust was weaponized against them. It's important to name why this happens and why calling these men monsters misses the point. I need to say something clearly. The men who do this are human. I know that's uncomfortable. It would be easier to call them monsters, to imagine they are fundamentally different from other men, identifiable by some defect we could spot if we were vigilant enough. But they are not. They have jobs, families, social lives. They go to church. They coach Little League. They smile at neighbors. They are colleagues we laugh with. That's what makes this so insidious. And that is what we have to understand if we have any chance of stopping it. These men are not aberrations. They are the product of a system that has treated women's bodies as accessible, women's consent as optional, and women's pain as inconsequential. I want to be specific about what enables this. First, pornography has normalized the sexualization of unconscious women. Motherless is not a fringe site. It had 62 million visits in 1 month. Sleep content videos of unconscious and sedated women being assaulted is categorized, searchable, and mainstream. Claire McGlynn, a professor at Durham University who studies violence against women, told CNN that the presence of the material on mainstream porn sites glorifies abusive behaviors both on and offline. And algorithms also favor extreme content. The more violent, the more degrading, the more views, which means that more men are exposed to the idea than is normal. It becomes desirable and something to pursue. Second, these men find community online that reinforce their behavior. A psychologist named Annabelle Montag, who assessed half the men convicted in the Pellico trial, said that within these online groups, there's a sense of brotherhood. Men create bonds that meet their narcissistic needs. French lawmaker Sandrine Josso, who herself was drugged by a former senator, called these groups online rape academies. This is not an isolated deviance. This is a collective socialization into sexual violence. Third, marriage and partnerships have historically granted men access to women's bodies. Until shockingly recently in many countries, marital rape was legal. The law treated a wife's consent as permanently given at the altar. Now that's changed on paper, but has it changed culturally? The expectation persists that women owe men sex, that saying no repeatedly makes you frigid, difficult, and a bad partner. That once you are married or cohabiting, your body is shared property. Several of Giselle Pellico's rapists used the defense that they thought it was a consensual sex game. Zoe Watt's husband claimed that he thought she wanted to wake up to him having sex with her. It's important we understand that this is not ignorance. This is entitlement backed by centuries of law and culture that said women's bodies belong to the men who marry them. Fourth, economic dependence often traps women in dangerous relationships. Many women cannot leave because they cannot afford to, because they have children, because their immigration status depends on their spouse, because sometimes living means homelessness, poverty, or losing custody. So even when something feels wrong, even when they suspect, the cost of investigating, of discovering the truth, and having to act on it is prohibitive. And fifth, systems protect abusers, not victims. I'll get to this detail shortly, but for now, know this. Platforms profit from hosting this content and they hide behind legal protections. Police lack training and they often dismiss survivors. Conviction rates are abysmally low, and women are constantly told to protect themselves, to watch their drinks, to not walk alone at night. But the danger is also at home. There is no system to protect a woman there. So when I say these men are human, I mean it. They are predictable outputs of systems designed to devalue women. They are not exceptions. They are executing the logic of patriarchy, and calling them monsters lets everybody else off the hook. So I also want to talk about what women need to know. And I really want to be careful not to put the responsibility for stopping this on women. As a survivor of assault, I know it is easy to sometimes internalize responsibility. And this is not what I want to do here. What I know for sure is that when this happens under your roof in your home, there is no foolproof way to protect yourself from someone you trust who has access to your food and your drinks. From what I'm learning, the advice I'm about to give is not a here's how to stay safe. It's more of a here's what to look for if something feels wrong. The women who are survivors of this depravity did nothing wrong. Their trust was not a mistake. Their inability to detect what was designed to be undetected is not a failure. So if you're hearing this and something feels wrong, if your instincts are telling you something is off, here's what you need to know based on the research I have compiled. Signs that you may have been drugged include things like unexplained memory gaps, especially around falling asleep or waking up in different clothes than you fell asleep in, waking up in different position or location than you remember, unexplained bruiseness, soreness, or physical signs that something happened to your body, extreme fatigue that doesn't match your activity level, feeling nauseous or groggy in ways that aren't explained by illness, your partner being unusually insistent that you take medication, drink something, or eat something specific. The drugs being used have also evolved. So it's not just GHB, and those are heavily controlled in countries, so they're harder to access. Perpetrators have now shifted to prescription sleeping pills. So pills like Ambien, which is prescribed for insomnia, it acts quite quickly and it leaves the body within 7 to 8 hours, which makes it quite hard to detect. Other men use crushed sleeping pills, anti-anxiety medications, or a combination of alcohol and sedatives. If you suspect that you've been drugged, go to a hospital or call emergency services immediately. Many of these drugs leave the body within 12 to 72 hours, so time absolutely matters. Tell someone you trust, not your partner, but someone outside the relationship. If possible, keep the suspected drink or substance for testing. Do not drink alcohol or take any other substance as they can interfere with testing. Report it to the police, but know that police departments are undertrained in recognizing drug-facilitated sexual assault and may not take your report seriously. Push for testing anyway. One of the hardest truths we must sit with is that in England and Wales, 43% of recorded sexual assaults involve a partner or an ex-partner. 23% of victims were unconscious or asleep when assaulted. Conviction rates for sexual offenses remain low across Europe and the United States. This means that while the danger is real, the systems meant to protect you often fail, and the burden of protecting yourselves falls disproportionately on you. That is not fair. That is not right, but is the reality we're operating in. So if something feels wrong, trust that. You're not paranoid. You're not overreacting. Your body knows. And please know that if it is safe to do so, you are allowed to investigate. You are allowed to check medications in your home. You are allowed to look at devices. You are allowed to ask questions. And you are allowed to leave. Trust is valuable, but trust plus awareness is safer than trust plus blind faith. So why do systems fail women, and what needs to change? This is made possible at a structural level. Platforms profit from hosting illegal content and face no consequences. Motherless.com operates under US safe harbor laws, which effectively shields platforms from liability for content uploaded by users. As long as they respond to takedown requests, they are largely protected. And here's the thing, sleep content is evidence of crime. It shows unconscious women being assaulted, and yet it stays up, generating ad revenue for months and years. A UK regulator investigated Motherless, not for content, but for failing to complete paperwork on age verification. The company submitted the paperwork and the investigation closed, and the contents effectively remained. Telegram, where the Triple Z's group operated, says it prohibits content that encourages sexual violence. But the group had nearly 1,000 members before CNN investigations led to it being taken down. These platforms could proactively monitor for illegal content. They could use AI to detect and remove sleep videos. They could report users to authorities, but they do not because it is not profitable and because they are not legally required to do so. So a lot needs to change. Platforms should be required to proactively monitor for illegal content, not just respond to reports. Sleep content should be treated as evidence of crime and immediately removed and reported to the law enforcement. Platforms that repeatedly host illegal content should lose their safe harbor protections, and age verifications and content moderation should be enforced with real penalties for non-compliance. Another thing that needs to change is that police lack training and they often dismiss survivors. Amanda Stanhope showed police video evidence of her partner sexually assaulting her while she was unconscious. They told her, "Oh, we can't use that. It looks like you're pretending." This is not an isolated case. Across Europe and the US, police departments lack specific training in recognizing drug-facilitated sexual assault. Many don't even take complaints seriously. Many don't know what to test for or how quickly the drugs leave the body. So what needs to change is that there needs to be mandatory training for law enforcement on drug-facilitated sexual assault. There needs to be protocols for immediate testing when drug-facilitated sexual assault is suspected, and there needs to be accountability for dismissing or mishandling reports. We also need to address the legal systems that enable perpetrators. Several of Giselle Pellico's rapists claimed they thought it was a consensual sex game, and some received as little as 3 years. 3 years. That is nothing. In Italy, Valentina's husband received 8 years for multiple aggravated sexual assault across 20 years. In England, Zoe Watt's husband received 11 years. These sentences do not match the harm. And conviction rates remain abysmally low because these cases are hard to prove, memory losses, drugs that leave the body quickly, and word of a wife against her husband's. So what needs to change is that laws must explicitly state that unconsciousness means no consent, period. You cannot consent when you are not conscious. Sex game defenses should be inadmissible. Sentencing should reflect the severity and the duration of the abuse. We also need to interrogate marriage culture that still treats women's bodies as accessible. France passed a law after the Pellicos trial stating that any non consensual sexual act constitutes sexual assault. That this had to be clarified in 2024 tells you everything. Marital rape has been illegal in the US since 1993. Culturally, the expectation persists that wives owe their husbands sex. So what needs to change? Cultural narratives about marriage and consent needs to change. Education about bodily autonomy starting very young. Economic policies that reduce women's dependence on male partners, because financial independence is a survival infrastructure. And here's another truth we have to name. Women are told to fear strangers, to not walk alone at night, to watch their drinks at bars. But statistically, the danger is intimate partners. The danger is at home. And there is no public infrastructure designed to protect women there. No one tells women, check your medications. Notice if you're falling asleep differently. Pay attention if your partner insists you drink or eat something specific. Because naming that will require admitting that home is not safe, that marriage is not safe, that the men women love are statistically more dangerous than strangers on the street. And that truth, everything we've built on this social order. So instead, we tell women, be careful, to trust their instincts to protect themselves. And we leave the systems that enable this violence completely intact. I also need to name something clearly. The three survivors CNN interviewed are white women from the UK and Italy. Giselle Pellico is a white French woman. Their stories made international news. They were believed. Their abusers were convicted. This is not the experience of all women. Black women, immigrant women, poor women, indigenous women, women in the global south. They face additional barriers to being believed, to accessing justice, to even being able to report. Giselle Pellico had video evidence. She was 72, married for 50 years, sympathetic in ways white European women are allowed to be sympathetic. Her case became a global feminist rallying cry. But how many women of color, how many poor women, how many immigrant women whose legal status depends on their spouse have been dismissed, disbelieved, or unable to report at all? The infrastructure that enables this violence is global, but access to justice is not equally distributed. Race, class, immigration status, disability, even language barriers, all of these determine who gets believed, whose case gets investigated, and who gets conviction. So when we talk about this issue, we also need to account for the fact that it doesn't affect all women equally. It really doesn't. This is an awful thing to happen. So my naming this is not oppression Olympics. It's just stating the reality for a lot of women who, on the basis of their identities or the cultures they are in, do not even get a chance at justice. The systems that fail white women catastrophically fail women of color, poor women, and marginalized women even more. Any solution that does not center the most vulnerable women is not a solution. It's just rearranging who gets protection and who doesn't. Giselle Pellico sat in that courtroom and said, shame must change sides. Zoe Watts, Amanda Stanhope, and Valentina chose to speak publicly. They refused to carry the shame that belonged to men who harmed them. They refused to disappear. And in refusing, they created a path for other women to follow, to name what's happened, to seek justice, and to know that they are not alone in this. Their courage does not erase their pain, but it breaks the silence that protects perpetrators. If you're listening to this and something feels wrong in your own relationship, if you have unexplained memory gaps, if you wake up differently than you fell asleep, if your body is telling you something that your mind does not want to believe, I need you to hear this. You're not imagining it. You're not paranoid. You're not overreacting. Your instincts exist to protect you. Trust them, investigate, and know that whatever you find, the shame is not yours to carry. And I know this is not easy, but know that it is not yours to carry. And for all of us who are raising daughters, raising sons, teaching families, building communities, we have to ask ourselves, what are we teaching the next generation about women's bodies, about consent, about trust? Because what we allow now, what we normalize, what we refuse to name now becomes what our daughters inherit. This will not stop because individual women are more vigilant. It will stop when we collectively refuse to tolerate the systems that make it possible. So here's what we need. For individuals, believe survivors. Don't ask why they didn't know. Do not question their trust. If something feels wrong in your own relationship, trust that. Investigate. You are absolutely allowed to. Support organizations working on drug-facilitated sexual assault awareness, legal reform, and survival services. For systems, we have to demand platform accountability. We have to contact our legislators. We have to support regulations that requires proactive content moderation and removal of illegal material. We have to also demand police training on drug-facilitated sexual assault. We have to demand protocols for immediate testing. It's important to support legal reforms that explicitly define consent and eliminate sex games defenses. We also have to support economic policies that reduce women's dependence on male partners. And this includes provisions like universal childcare, affordable housing, heck, living wages. And for culture, we really need to stop telling women to protect themselves from strangers when the danger is also the intimate partners at home. We need to stop treating marriage as a zone where consent is assumed and women's bodies are accessible. It's so important to stop consuming pornography that sexualizes unconsciousness, coercion, or lack of consent. We need to raise boys who understand that women's bodies are not theirs to access, ever. This is not about individual monsters. This is about what we have collectively built and what we are collectively responsible for dismantling. The men who drug their wives are human. They are the predictable output of systems that devalue women. And those systems will not change unless we make them. Thank you for listening. Thanks for being here. If you need help, resources are available. In the US, call the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-4678 or visit RAINN, that is RAINN.org. Internationally, UN Women and the Pixel Project have directories of support services worldwide. You are not alone. This episode is part of Overnight Wisdom, where we use the three clarities: identity, context, and power to make sense of the systems shaping our lives. Today, we looked at who these men are, what systems enable them, and where power actually sits to stop this. If this framework is useful for you, you find it applied to leadership, culture, and social issues in almost every episode. Thanks for being here, and see you next week.